Did you know Sean Young once walked into the Warner Bros. Lot wearing a homemade Catwoman suit, trying to land a role she was never even officially cast in? Some people call that fearless. Others call it delusional. But one thing was clear. By the early 90s, Sean Young had gone from Hollywood's next big thing to tabloid punchline. She starred in Blade Runner. She more than held her own opposite Kevin Costner in No Way Out. She looked poised to become a major force in the industry, and then it all just collapsed. Was it bad luck, studio politics, or something deeper? Whatever the reason, Sean Young's career crashed harder than anyone expected, and Hollywood never quite forgave her. So what the hell happened? Fade to black. Sean Young was born Mary Sean Young on November 20th, 1959, in Louisville, Kentucky. Her father worked as a TV producer and journalist. Her mother was a screenwriter and PR executive. It wasn't a typical Hollywood upbringing, but storytelling was baked into her life from day one. As a teenager, she trained at the Interlochen Arts Academy in Michigan, focusing on classical ballet. Back then, she cared more about timing, precision, and movement than movie stardom. Her path looked like it was headed toward the stage, not the screen. After graduating, she enrolled at the School of American Ballet in New York. But eventually, the pull toward acting became too strong to ignore. She started modeling to pay the bills, and before long she was landing auditions. There was something about her, more than just the look. A confidence that read as sharp, unpredictable, and slightly dangerous. And in 1980, she made her film debut in Jane Austen in Manhattan. It wasn't a blockbuster, but it was enough to get her in the room. And the very next year, she landed a small part in a hit comedy that changed everything. Her first real brush with the big leagues came in 1981 with Stripes, one of those classic early 80s screwball comedies, loud, chaotic, packed with charm. Bill Murray leads the charge alongside Harold Ramis, with John Candy, Warren Oates, Judge Reinhold, even a young John Larroquette in full sleazeball mode. This was a movie made by people who knew how to walk the line between irreverent and insane, and it was a hit. Sean Young plays MP Louise Cooper, opposite PJ Soles as the other love interest. And sure, the role is small, but she holds her own in a film dominated by loud male energy. She has this easy, relaxed presence, something softer that contrasts with the absurdity around her. She also has great on-screen chemistry with Ramis, and even in just a few scenes, you can see something flickering behind her eyes, like she's absorbing everything and quietly sizing up the industry. This wasn't just a pretty face doing the rom-com background routine. The shoot was tight, a little messy at times, but full of energy, and by most accounts, Sean fit in well with the cast. She wasn't the star yet, but she was learning fast, and she was getting noticed. The film was a box office success, pulling in over $85 million on a modest $10 million budget. Critics mostly embraced it too. Roger Ebert called it an appealing, raggedy comedy and praised Murray's deadpan charisma. It wasn't perfect, but it didn't need to be. Stripes found its audience quickly, and over time it became a fan favorite. And there she is, standing shoulder to shoulder with all these future comedy icons, holding her own with very little screen time. That's not easy. Looking back, Stripes wasn't just a breakout for the guys. It was the beginning of something for Sean Young too. Because if Stripes got her in the door, then Blade Runner slammed it wide open. In 1982, Sean Young starred opposite Harrison Ford in Ridley Scott's dystopian noir masterpiece, a film that didn't just redefine science fiction, it reshaped what it looked like. And I'll hold my hands up. This is one of my most beloved movies of all time. One of those VHS tapes that barely survived the 80s in my house. Everything about it, the Vangelis score, the lighting, the world building, the sound design, it's hypnotic. And the performances, completely off the scale. So seeing Sean Young show up in this right after Stripes stopped me in my tracks. She couldn't have been more different. Gone was the easy, casual charm. Here, she was restrained, deliberate, enigmatic. She played Rachel like someone walking a tightrope over her own identity, calm on the surface, but with something fragile always lurking underneath. It wasn't a loud performance. It wasn't showy. And I suppose that was the point. She didn't play Rachel like a typical Hollywood leading lady. She played her like someone desperately trying to hold herself together. Even if Blade Runner wasn't a smash hit at the time, it was polarizing, and it underperformed at the box office. Critics still took notice of Young's performance. And as the film grew into a cult classic and eventually one of the most revered sci-fi films ever made, so did her role. But behind the scenes, things weren't quite so cinematic. There were reports of tension on set between Young and Harrison Ford. Some claimed their chemistry on screen didn't reflect their relationship off it. And while Ridley Scott praised her look and screen presence, there were rumblings that she was difficult. It's hard to separate the mythology from the truth. But either way, this was the start of something that would follow Sean Young for the rest of her career. After Blade Runner, you'd think the momentum would carry, and on paper it did. In 1984, Sean Young signed on for another massive sci-fi epic, this time with David Lynch at the helm. The film was Dune, adapted from Frank Herbert's notoriously dense novel, and it had all the markings of a career-defining event: a sprawling cast, a huge budget, and a massive fan base behind it. Sean played Chani, the Fremen love interest of Paul Atreides, played by a young Kyle MacLachlan in his film debut. Her role is important in the book, but in the film it ended up heavily condensed, more of a background presence than a fully developed character. Now, I'll be honest, I have a real soft spot for this one. It was part of that little golden patch in the early 80s when studios were swinging for the fences with sci-fi. Wild world building, strange tone, beautiful scores, and Dune was right in the middle of that moment. Sean doesn't get much screen time, but she still makes an impression. The problem is, Dune just didn't land. The production was chaotic. The story got butchered in the edit, and the final cut felt like a collection of gorgeous ideas without enough glue to hold it together. Critics pounced bloated, confusing, borderline incoherent. Lynch disowned it. The studio lost money, and the sci-fi crowd split right down the middle. And once again, Sean Young was part of something ambitious, but ultimately flawed. That was two major sci-fi projects in a row, and both stumbled commercially, even if they became favorites later. But then came a turn. A shift away from sandworms and space politics into something far more grounded. A slick political thriller, a leading role, and a chance to show a side of Sean Young Hollywood hadn't really seen yet. In 1987, she finally got a role that let her step out of the shadows. No sci-fi world building, no artificial mystery, just a taut, high-stakes political thriller, and she was right at the center of it. No Way Out paired her with Kevin Costner, who was on the verge of becoming a major star himself. She played Susan Atwell, a woman caught in a deadly love triangle involving a high-ranking government official and a naval officer. It's the kind of role that can go one of two ways: flat femme fatale cliché or something more. Sean Young made it more. She had real chemistry with Costner, and for once she was allowed to show range, vulnerability, danger, confidence, chaos, sometimes all in the same scene. Critics praised her. The New York Times called it a bold, sexy performance that electrifies the first act. Audiences responded too. No Way Out was a box office hit, and her face was suddenly everywhere again. And for a moment, it looked like this was it. The turning point. The breakout moment that would finally push her into that next tier of leading actresses. If you look at that early run, you've got to admit, she must have had one hell of an agent. Stripes, Blade Runner, Dune, No Way Out. That's a phenomenal run by anyone's standards. From the outside, it looked like Sean Young had arrived. But Hollywood has a habit of turning the volume down just as you're hitting your stride. And behind closed doors, the whispers had already started. She even popped up briefly in Wall Street. Blink and you'll miss it. But it wasn't a small thing. This was Oliver Stone coming straight off Platoon, riding a wave of awards and acclaim. The cast was stacked with heavyweight talent. And the fact that Young was cast, even in a minor role, just underscored how in demand she was in that late 80s stretch. By the way, if you're enjoying this video and want to support the channel, you can now buy me a coffee. It helps keep these retrospectives going and lets me keep shining a light on actors Hollywood tends to forget. You'll find the link down in the description below. Cheers. Back to the video. After No Way Out, Sean Young looked poised for even bigger opportunities. The biggest franchises, the biggest roles, the pieces looked lined up. One of the first was Batman in 1989. According to multiple accounts, Young had been cast as Vicky Vale and reportedly took part in weeks of read-throughs and rehearsals. Then came the accident. During horseback riding exercises in pre-production, she reportedly fell and broke her arm or her collarbone, depending on who you ask. Because of the injury, Sean Young was replaced by Kim Basinger, and her shot at a major studio blockbuster quietly slipped away. But she wasn't done with Gotham. When Batman Returns rolled around, she was still in the mix, and this time she had her sights set on Catwoman. According to press reports and her own recollections, she showed up at the Warner Bros. Lot in a homemade Catwoman costume, asking to be seen by Tim Burton or someone in casting. Some accounts claim she tried to enter production offices uninvited. Others say she caught executives completely off guard. And whether or not Burton literally hid under his desk, as some versions of the story suggest, the incident quickly became Hollywood lore. And for Sean Young, it was deadly serious. Most actors would have played it safe. Let their agent make the call, maybe send over a headshot. She didn't get the part. Michelle Pfeiffer did, and delivered one of the most iconic performances of the decade. But Young didn't fade out. She just became a lot harder to cast. That Catwoman stunt became a reference point in every conversation about her. People stopped talking about her performances and started talking about her behavior. And that's when the difficult label really started to stick. Maybe it wasn't fair, maybe it wasn't even accurate, but in 90s Hollywood, that was often all it took to change everything. Then came Ace Ventura, Pet Detective in 1994, a huge box office hit. Jim Carrey at the peak of his chaos. Sean Young played Lieutenant Lois Einhorn, a character revealed in the film's climax to be a man in disguise. And the way it's handled, well, I don't know. Some people would say it hasn't aged particularly well, but I still think it's hilarious. The film goes for big, crass laughs, and Young becomes the target of the joke more than part of the comedy. And the reaction, the movie made money, but Sean's stock didn't rise with it. If anything, the opposite happened. All the while, the press kept circling back to the same story. The Catwoman costume, the label of instability, the anecdotes from directors and producers painting her as hard to work with. Sometimes it was vague, sometimes it was just mean. Sean Young said it herself. What I didn't know in my early career was very good self-preservation skills. I didn't know how to censor myself at all. And that lack of self-censorship ultimately cost her. The 2000s were quieter, at least in terms of major studio roles. She popped up in unexpected places. The Young and the Restless, a guest spot on Reno 911, and Blink and You'll Miss It appearances in quirky indies and low-budget thrillers. Her face had changed a little with time, but the spark, that slightly off-kilter energy, was still there. Then came Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew in 2011. And honestly, it was hard to watch. The show framed her at times as delusional or detached from reality. But if you look past the editing and the sensationalism, what you saw was a woman trying to claw her way back, trying to be heard, trying to be understood in an industry that had chewed her up and spat her out. In Jugface in 2013, she gave a small but chilling performance. There was no big Oscar campaign, no magazine covers declaring a triumphant resurrection, but there was work. And for an actor like Sean Young, someone who'd become a kind of industry cautionary tale, that said something. If you listen to her in interviews today, there's a sense of peace in her voice. A woman who's been through the storm and come out the other side with a few scars, sure, but with her sense of humor still intact. We remember the roles, Rachel in Blade Runner, Channy in Dune, Susan in No Way Out. But we also remember the what-ifs. What if she'd played Catwoman? What if she'd been given more chances, more space to evolve? These days, Sean Young lives a quieter life. She's married, she's a mother, and she still turns up now and then in indie projects and festival circuit films. She's had a whirlwind of a career, stormy, unpredictable, and at times unforgiving. But you can't say it's been boring. I mean, what a ride. Let's hope she's found some peace away from the industry and all the noise of the press. Thanks for sticking around. I really do appreciate you watching these all the way to the end. And as ever, I look forward to seeing you all in the next one.